Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Well, Jonah gets up and runs in the opposite direction. There is so much that is comic about this book of Jonah. Its protagonist is something of an anti-hero. Jonah does everything in his power to thwart God's evangelistic mission to Nineveh. First, he runs in the opposite direction. Then, when he's humbled and brought to the great city against his will, he preaches a 5-word sermon of utter doom and destruction. And finally, when the Lord actually saves the Ninevites, he becomes furious at the grace of God. If we are looking for a hero in the book of Jonah, it's not Jonah. But Jonah does picture his Lord in an incredible way. You see, as Jonah flees from the Lord, he boards a ship heading to Tarshish, or we would call that Spain today. This is all Jonah chapter 1. In Jonah chapter 1, the Lord hurls a great wind onto the sea, stirring up a mighty storm. When we considered Psalm 107 a few weeks ago, we saw how storms are a sign of chaos and darkness in this world. So in Jonah chapter 1, we have the Lord's prophet on a boat in the midst of a storm. And how will these seafarers be saved who Jonah is sailing with? Well, Jonah chapter 1 and verse 12, Jonah says to the other sailors, "Pick me up and throw me into the sea, and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." The prophet of the Lord is eventually hurled into the great raging abyss. He is swallowed by a great monster of the deep. It's not actually called a whale in the Bible, but that's how we've come to remember the story. Jonah is swallowed by this great monster of the deep. And through the judgment of the one, Jonah, the many in the boat are saved. Looking back on this episode, Jesus said this in Matthew 12 from verse 40. He said, "For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a huge fish, so the Son of Man will be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The men of Nineveh will stand up at the judgment with this generation and condemn it, for they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and now someone greater than Jonah is here." Well, Jesus is one greater than Jonah, far greater than Jonah. You see, we were like Jonah. We were like the ones who was fleeing from the Lord. And Jesus is the one who is the truly innocent one. And yet Jesus has joined us in our predicament. Imagine us in the boat. We are the guilty ones. We are running from the Lord. We are in the midst of a great storm. And yet Jesus says, "Cast me into the abyss." He is the one swallowed by that great monster called death, so that we might be saved. It's a wonderful picture of the gospel, actually. And this is the Lord's heart. The Lord is not just for the Ninevites, He's not just for those sailors on the sea. At the cost of His own blood, He pursues a lost world even to the pit of hell. Christ is so much greater than Jonah. Though it cost Him everything, He ran to the rescue to bring us life. Think about Jonah. We will think about Jonah a little bit more tomorrow as we think about him as an evangelist. But right now, let's think about Jesus, the one greater than Jonah. Sometimes people play a game about getting voted off a lifeboat. People take it in turns to make their case for why they should survive and why somebody else should be voted off and thrown overboard. It's all a bit of fun as a game, but what Jonah did in the Old Testament was for real. He volunteered to die to save the others. And what Jesus did was just out of this world. As one greater than Jonah, he was innocent as opposed to Jonah. Unlike Jonah, he owned the boat. He was Lord over the storm. He was the innocent one, but he joined us in our storms. We are the guilty who deserve to be thrown overboard, and yet he is the one who volunteers to be abandoned that we might be saved. Leonard Cohen wrote this in his song Suzanne. He says, "And Jesus was a sailor when he walked upon the water, and he spent a long time watching from his lonely wooden tower, and when he knew for certain only drowning men could see him, he said, 'All men will be sailors then until the sea shall free them.' But he himself was broken long before the sky would open, forsaken, almost human. He sank beneath your wisdom like a stone." Leonard Cohen grew up Jewish. He became Buddhist. But his words here about Jesus are more true than he knows, probably. You see, voluntarily, Jesus sank beneath our wisdom like a stone. Effectively, he says to you and me, Jonah chapter 1, verse 12, "Pick me up and hurl me into the raging abyss, and it will become calm for you. I know that it is your fault that this great storm has come upon you, but let it be my life for yours." That is the courage, the sacrifice, and the love of Jesus, one greater than Jonah.